All right. The next lesson here, we're going to talk about creating our first component. So we're going to build on what we just went through with Create React App. We've got ourselves a TypeScript template project that's stubbed out for us. We've got Yarn Start running in our terminal, and inside our browser, we have an empty application, just an empty page, and all is great. So we'll head over to our editor, and we are going to create a new directory called components inside our source folder. So source components, and that will be great. So in here in components or source, we have a components folder. And inside that folder, we're going to create our first file, and we're going to call it greeting.tsx. So we're going to edit source components, and we're going to call this greeting.tsx. I apologize for any sniffles that might show up. I'm getting a cold. I tried to escape it, but I couldn't. It got me. All right, so in this file, we're going to start by importing React, which is basically the first thing we're going to do in just about every React file. We're going to import React from React. So let's talk about what's happening here. React is, in this case, import React is a exported constant from the React library. So this React comes from somewhere deep down inside Node modules, and we are referencing this exported constant from that package. And I'll show you, we're going to do basically the exact same thing with the files we create. So as we write these files, we're going to be writing what are known as React function components. It's essentially a JavaScript function that returns a JSX element or a TSX element, which is just a fancy way of saying HTML inside JavaScript. So let's just do it because it's easy. I can't sit here and talk about it all day. So we're going to say const. We're going to give this a name, greeting. And because this is TypeScript, we have to tell it what type of constant this is. So we're going to put a semicolon, or no, a colon, and then we're going to say react.fc, which means React function component. We're going to say equals, and then we're going to do our fat arrow function. And in here, we're going to say return. We're going to give ourselves a little return block with some parentheses, and we're going to throw a paragraph tag in here right now that says by Felicia. Now, the last thing we have to do in here is we have to export this. So we've created a component, we've created a function, but now we want to make this available to be imported anywhere else inside of our application. So we're going to add export in front of that constant declaration. And when we save this, we now have a component that we can use. So let's go use it. So let's head over to app.tsx, and we are going to start by importing it here on line 3. Import curly braces greeting, and this is going to come from components/greeting, and we actually don't need the TSX. And then to use it, to make it appear on the page, we're going to throw in an HTML tag with our component name. When we save this and head over to our browser, you'll see that our component gets rendered on the page as by Felicia, which is pretty neat. So we've created our first component. That's pretty boring on its own, obviously. It doesn't do much. So let's do some things. Maybe we want to pass in a name dynamically. Maybe it's not always Felicia that we're saying bye to. So let's add some properties or some props to our component that we can then pass in when we render it. So back over in greeting, we're going to start by defining an interface. I cannot tell you exactly what an interface is or all the technical things behind it, but I know that an interface allows us to basically describe to TypeScript what types of properties and what types those properties should be that we pass into our component. So we're going to define this as interface. We're going to call this greeting props. And then we'll do some curly braces. And we're going to start with a name, which is going to be a string. And then we will also add one for is arriving. We're going to make this one optional by putting a question mark there and then a colon. And then we're going to make this a Boolean. And what we're going to do here is we're going to be able to pass in a name, so we can say bye to whoever, and then we can also pass in an optional property for is arriving, so that we can either say hi or bye depending on whether or not the person is arriving. Riveting, right? So we have defined an interface, but now we have to tell our function component to use that interface, or basically, in my terms, in development according to Davey, we have to like extend the properties that come in this function component with our own properties. So to do that, we're going to put in some greater than, less than symbols, right, left, carets, whatever you want to call them. I'm going to pass in greeting props to that. Then we're going to deconstruct those properties, which sounds really cool. And I mean, I can kind of like infer what that means, but we're going to put some curly braces inside of our function, like we'd pass any kind of an argument into a JavaScript function. We're going to put curly braces, and then we're going to list out the component or the properties that we just defined. So name, whoops, thanks, and is arriving. We'll go there. And to clean this up, we could put these on separate lines. That's a nice thing to do. Nice and tidy. So we'll do that like this. And we'll give ourselves a new line there. And so we have name and is arriving. Now, if we were to save this, we're going to get an error in our console or in the browser because the property name is missing in type, but required in type greeting props. So it took me way too long to figure out that I should probably be reading these errors instead of just trying to guess at what I did wrong. So what this is telling us is that inside app.tsx, we're referencing a greeting component, and we are missing the property name from that. Well, why is that? Well, up here on line 4, we said we're expecting a name. We didn't use a question mark, which means it's required. And inside app.tsx, when we call greeting, we didn't provide a name. So let's provide a name. So we'll say name equals Danny Boy. Now when we save that, TypeScript's going to get happy. And again, we have bye Felicia. Why don't we see Danny Boy? Well, we haven't told our greeting component to actually use that name yet. We still have Felicia down here hard-coded. So we can make a change there by removing Felicia and replacing it with some curly braces and putting our JavaScript variable inside there. Now when we save this, we'll get bye Danny Boy, and that's pretty cool. Now let's use the is arriving prop to do something fun with that. So inside app.tsx, we're going to create another instance of this component. So we're just going to copy that down, and we're going to throw is arriving on this one. Whoops. We're going to throw is arriving on that one. And that's not going to do much yet because we haven't written any logic for it inside of our greeting component. So inside greeting.tsx, we can come in here and replace bye with a conditional. So we can say if is arriving is true, this is like a single one-line ternary. I think ternary is the right word. Either that or I'm just making stuff up. So if the person is arriving, we will say hi. Otherwise, we will say bye. So if we save that and look at it in the browser, we have nothing for some reason. Did I save this file? There we go. So we have bye Danny Boy and hi Danny Boy. And there we have our very first component that uses props, and it's pretty neat. That's the basics of React. You've built an app. Congratulations. Time for a beer. When we come back, we will look at, we're going to build another component, but next time we're going to build one, we're going to build a timer, not a timer. I keep saying timer. We're going to build a counter, and we're going to use, we're going to look at using a hook from React called useState, which lets us do some really basic low-level state management, and we'll see how to interact with that kind of stuff. So until next time.